Hey guys, Omni here. So last night I saw Thor Love and Thunder, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on the film. Just right out of the gate, I definitely feel like this is going to be another one of those divisive Phase 4 films. If you didn't like Ragnarok or the tonal inconsistencies of that film, like the interjected humor into moments where it probably wasn't needed, this is going to really irritate you, this movie in particular, because it really ramps that up to 11. And where it didn't bother me that much, it was a critique of mine about the film, but it didn't hamper my enjoyment. I love Ragnarok. It is still, I would say, probably in my top 5 MCU films. With that said, this movie really started to press my buttons with it. I'll be 100% real with you. I felt like the humor was just amped up in a way where it just kind of was attempting to undercut every emotional beat throughout this entire movie. There are some jokes that land, but unlike with Ragnarok, I personally found a lot of the humor to be kind of grating. And that's kind of unusual for Taika and me, because I like a lot of his work, both his TV shows and all of his previous movies. I thought it's generally worked really well up until this point, but I felt like I feel like this one was the most where I felt like there was internal conflict between the tones of the movie, where there was like some tonal inconsistencies before. I really felt like the tones were fighting in this movie with each other, from when it wanted to be a comedy and when it wanted to actually be a serious reflection on some themes that are actually a lot heavier than some of the ones we've explored previously with Thor or any of these other characters. I think with especially wish they could have fleshed these out. And I think that's one of the things, especially with a villain like Gorr the God Butcher, is one of the things that disappoints me a little bit the most about the film, is that there's a lot of interesting directions that they could have really explored with these characters and with these themes that would have been great to really just kind of dive into and not pull the punches on it and not really sugarcoat everything or soften the blow at every turn with a quip. And like I said, I feel like 85% of the jokes in this movie didn't land for me, which again is just odd, and I don't know where that comes from. But I will say that when these themes are brought to the forefront, when they are given these few and far between moments to kind of shine, I really like what they go into and how they kind of address them within the kind of lenses of our characters, primarily Gorr, Thor, and Jane. The way they incorporate Jane into the story and bringing her back into the fold, I thought they did that really well. And I love the arc that they have with her in this movie and the journey that she goes on and just her personal growth and drive that they have in this movie, because she's a pretty fleshed out character, and what she's going through is something that's really powerful. Again, it's not really... It's probably expanded upon the most out of some of the other themes that they tackle, because this movie goes into things like mortality, loss, depression, PTSD, faith. You know, it goes to show, like, when you're in your darkest moments, what different people will turn to. You know, whether it's Thor and going back to people that he loves, returning to New Asgard, reconnecting with Valkyrie, and unbeknownst to him, running into Jane and having that conflict kind of bubble back up to the surface with a lot of their unresolved issues. And we actually get a lot of information between these two and what actually happened to them between films when they kind of wrote her out with them breaking up. We kind of explore that. And there's a lot of really interesting ways that they dive into that I found really gripping while it was allowed to occur. And it was really well handled. I think this movie does Thor and Jane's relationship more justice than any of the previous films that had them in these movies together, and I think it was the best and the most powerful that the Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman's actual chemistry on screen has been. Gorr, Christian Bale, kills it in this movie as our villain, and he is thrilling, he is terrifying when he's allowed to be on screen, and he really elevates this, because on the writing side of things, this character's a little flat, where this character could have been really explored pretty heavily, but he's kind of like, I wouldn't say an afterthought in the film, but he is definitely not the focus of the movie. Like, he's there to present a semi-existential crisis to the world, to the characters. What really elevates this character, though, in the film is Christian Bale's performance. I think he really does a lot to elevate this character on screen to where the script itself and the pacing of the film really kind of, I think, drop the ball with the handling of this character. His introduction is handled very rushed. After a short introduction with the initial conflict with his character, he kind of disappears. His presence and his threat to not just our characters, but the balance of the world is not really felt until the third act. Feels like a misstep of the film. And I think that comes down to the length of the movie, which, excluding the credits, is probably only maybe an hour and 50 minutes, an hour and 45 maybe. And it really shows because there's a lot of interesting things they set up with these characters, but they just don't have the time to explore. Like, I really want Jane to have more time to kind of reflect on everything that's going on and kind of flesh out some of these beats a little bit more. The first two acts of this film are also very disconjointed as well, with the pacing, the flow, and again, the balance of the tones, which is just, again, just always fighting each other in every scene. While Thor mostly throughout this thing is mostly played as a joke the entire time, even his insecurities, even his struggles are kind of played for laughs. Like, after where we saw Thor at the end of Endgame, it really returns him being back to just kind of like a simple buffoon in a lot of ways. He's just very disconnected from everybody, and not like as the result of any of his trauma or anything like that. He's just written to be kind of an idiot in this movie, more so than we've ever seen him before. But by the time the third act rolls around, things are allowed to breathe a little bit more. Once all the setup is out of the way, which is mostly the first two acts, we linger in scenes. We still have some uninvited comedy here and there, but not nearly as much as in the first two acts. But the third act gives us a lot of the more emotional core beats, and there are some scenes that legitimately pulled at my heartstrings. There are some visually stunning imagery in the third act, as well as some epic set pieces and fights. So we get a glimpse of one of them in the trailers, where they're on the Shadow Realm, where the characters are all desaturated of color, except for the energy illuminating some minor bits of color back into the scene. That whole scene was beautiful. The action was really well handled, and I really love what they did with that scene and how they then built up into the climax of the movie and to the final fight and standoff with Gorr. It was really fun in that last little bit, and I'm not gonna lie, there's some moments there throughout that definitely had me smiling ear to ear. There are some moments that legitimately pulled at my heartstrings and got me a little misty. I just wish at the end of the day that we had more time in the movie to reflect and explore these themes and let these characters just kind of breathe a little bit and interact and explore and reflect on themselves a little bit more without having to force all this this padding, the unnecessary humor that really undercut a lot of scenes. It was just I don't know. At the end of the day, I surprisingly, as hard as I was on Multiverse of Madness, I greatly enjoy Multiverse of Madness way more than this film at the end of the day. This is not my least favorite Marvel film. It's not my least favorite Thor film. I think a lot of my feelings come from the disappointment in this compared to some of the previous films and the characters that they were introduced and the things they were trying to tackle in failing to really commit to any of it, except for like one thing. But I love the visuals. I love the set pieces. I love the action when it happens. I love what they did with Jane. I love Christian Bale's performance, even though they didn't really deliver fully on Gorr the God Butcher, in my opinion, in this film. And I always enjoy Chris Hemsworth as Thor, but I just feel like he got a little bit of the short end of the stick in this film. But I'm always excited to see where they do, what they do with him in the future and see where they go with his character. I will never fault Marvel for trying something different and trying to break their formula, even though like visually this kind of fits the mold still from the general aesthetic of the MCU, unlike the Eternals or anything like that. But they tried a different tone. They're trying to see what works with Thor, and I'd rather them explore and experiment and maybe miss the mark than to just be stagnant. It is what it is. It's just a double-edged sword. It's not always going to work, and it's not going to work for everybody, but where it didn't work for me, it might work for you. So don't take my issues with the film to heart. I'd rather you go check it out for yourself and feel your own opinion on the movie. And definitely, if you've seen it, I'd love to know how you all felt. Like, where does this stack up for you guys out of the Thor films, out of the MCU as a whole? Did you guys think it was too disjointed with the tones? Did you think that Gorr was fleshed out? What did you like? What did you not like? Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. Feel free to join us in our Discord. We can talk about it there as well. Links to that and all my socials in the description box below. Follow me in each and every one of those. Before we go, I want to shout out our channel edges: Mandy Sherritt, Ryan Karen, Jason Coleman, Philly Vane, Yori Korsgaard, Margaret Grace, Mary Bradley, Melita, Robert Aguiano, Calcestis Nation, and Raven McCann. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. But guys, that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody.